Welcome, curious souls. To Grey Vale echoes your portal to the world's most chilling mysteries and untold stories. Join us as we uncover the strange, the supernatural, and the truly unexplained. In the sweltering heat of Puerto Rico, 1995, a new horror emerged. Livestock lay dead, drained of blood, bearing strange puncture wounds. This wasn't the work of predators known to man. This was something else. A creature born of shadow and fear. In the quiet, sun-drenched rural communities of Puerto Rico, life often moved at a gentle pace. The rhythm was set by the seasons, the cycles of agriculture, and the familiar sounds of livestock in the fields. Families depended on their animals' goats for milk and meat, chickens for eggs, and various small creatures that formed the backbone of many a household's livelihood. It was a life deeply connected to the land, where the known dangers were typically limited to the occasional wild dog, a snake, or perhaps a thief. But then, as the calendar turned to March of 1995, something profoundly unsettling began to stir in the shadows. Something that would soon shatter the peace and plunge the island into a chilling reign of terror. The first whispers of trouble came from the isolated farms, from the very heart of the island's agricultural landscape. Farmers, waking with the dawn to tend to their daily chores, started finding their animals dead. Not just one or two, but sometimes entire pens wiped out in a single night. This in itself was horrifying, a devastating blow to families already living a modest existence. But what truly sent a cold shiver down the spines of those who discovered them was the nature of the deaths. These were not typical predator kills. There were no bloodstains splattered around, no torn flesh, no signs of a violent struggle that would suggest a hungry wild animal had breached the fences. The enclosures were often still intact, the ground undisturbed. It was as if the animals had simply ceased to be. Yet, they hadn't simply died. Upon closer inspection, a far more sinister truth emerged. The bodies of the goats, chickens, and sometimes even larger animals, lay strangely limp, almost deflated. Their eyes were often wide open, fixed in a silent, eternal scream. But the most horrifying detail, the one that defied all explanation, was the wounds. Small, precise puncture marks, often two, sometimes three, were found on the animals. These weren't jagged, tearing bites. They were neat, almost surgical, typically located on the neck, or sometimes the chest area. And the most macabre discovery of all, the animals were completely drained of blood. Every single drop. Their carcasses were like empty husks, pale and lifeless, leaving behind a horrifying, baffling mystery. The initial reactions were a mix of disbelief, confusion, and a desperate search for rational explanations. Farmers, bewildered, first blamed stray dogs, wild cats, or maybe even coyotes, though coyotes were not common on the island. But these theories quickly fell apart. A dog or a wild animal tears at its prey, leaves a bloody mess, and consumes parts of the carcass. This was entirely different. There was no flesh eaten, no gnawed bones, just the emptied shells of once living creatures. Veterinarians called to investigate were equally stumped. They examined the bodies, took samples, but could find no known pathogen, no familiar pattern of attack. The sheer volume of blood loss, without any external trauma beyond the tiny puncture wounds. Defied conventional understanding. How could so much blood disappear without a trace? The questions piled up, each one more unsettling than the last. As the weeks of March turned into April, the attacks continued, spreading like a slow, creeping plague across the island. What started as isolated incidents soon became a pattern. The number of dead animals grew, and with each new report, the collective sense of dread deepened. Farmers began to patrol their properties at night, armed with flashlights and whatever weapons they could find, their sleep shattered by anxiety. But the unseen predator, whatever it was, moved with an eerie stealth, striking even when watchdogs were present, leaving them inexplicably silent. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. This was not a problem that could be solved with traps or fences. This was something entirely new, entirely unknown, and utterly terrifying. Then came the moment that shifted the mystery from a series of inexplicable livestock deaths to a full-blown reign of terror. In the town of Canavanas, a witness finally saw it. The date was sometime in May 1995, and the account would etch itself into the island's collective memory, giving the unseen killer a horrific form. A local resident, whose name became synonymous with the early Chupacabra sightings, was going about their evening when they glimpsed something that defied all logic and all known biology. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a wild cat. And it certainly wasn't human. What they described was a creature of nightmares. The eyewitness account was chillingly detailed, and it painted a picture that would soon become famous around the world. The creature, they reported, was bipedal, meaning it walked on two legs, like a human, but with a strange, unnatural gait. It stood perhaps 3 to 4 feet tall, a size that was both unnerving and deeply unsettling, as it was too small to be a bear and too large to be any common predator. Its skin was reptilian-like, scaly, and a grayish-green hue, giving it a primitive, alien appearance. The head was described as oval-shaped, somewhat elongated, and the most terrifying feature of all, its eyes. They glowed a piercing, unnatural red, burning in the darkness, filled with an eerie, intelligent malevolence. Adding to its monstrous visage were sharp claws, visible on its hands and feet, clearly designed for tearing. But perhaps the most distinctive and horrifying detail was a row of spines running down its back, from the base of its neck all the way to its tail. These spines, the witness recounted, seemed to shimmer or change color slightly, making the creature appear even more otherworldly. It moved with a strange, hopping motion, incredibly fast, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as it had appeared. The psychological impact on the witness was immense, a deep, paralyzing terror that went beyond mere fear. It was the shock of encountering something that should not exist. A creature plucked from the darkest corners of myth and deposited squarely into reality. This first-hand description shattered the lingering possibility that the livestock deaths were merely the work of ordinary animals, or some bizarre disease. This was no ordinary predator. This was something truly alien, a monstrous entity with glowing eyes and a reptilian form. The initial reaction from some was skepticism. Of course, perhaps the witness had been mistaken, or frightened, or even made it up. But for the farmers who had lost their livelihoods, for the communities gripped by an escalating sense of terror, this description resonated deeply. It gave a name, a shape, to the nameless dread that had been haunting their nights. It was a tangible enemy, however bizarre, and its description spread like wildfire, adding a terrifying new dimension to the mystery. With the eyewitness account, the phenomenon exploded into the public consciousness. Local news outlets, initially reporting on the mysterious livestock deaths, now had a terrifying creature to describe. The story quickly transcended the island's borders. Picked up by national and international media, the narrative was irresistible. A cryptic creature, draining the blood of animals, now seen by a human witness. The fear, which had been simmering beneath the surface in the affected rural areas, now erupted across the entire island. Panic began to spread, an invisible virus of anxiety that infected daily life. People started locking their doors and windows at night with an urgency they hadn't felt before. Children were kept indoors after dusk, their playtime curtailed by the shadowy threat. Farmers, already exhausted from their fruitless vigils, became even more vigilant, though their efforts often proved futile against an adversary that seemed to appear and disappear like smoke. The previously peaceful nights of Puerto Rico were transformed into hours of anxious waiting, filled with heightened senses. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, magnified into a potential sign of the lurking horror. The joy of community gatherings began to dim, replaced by hushed conversations about the latest attacks, the most recent sightings, and the growing dread of the terrifying reports from Puerto Rico, filled with tales of a reptilian, red-eyed creature draining the life from farm animals, quickly made headlines around the world. But for many, especially those far from the Caribbean island, felt like a distant nightmare, a local legend unfolding in a place they might never visit. This comfort, however, would be short-lived. The Chupacabra, turned out, was not content to remain confined to the shores of Puerto Rico. Like a virulent shadow, it began to spread, its dark legend creeping across borders, bringing with it a fresh wave of fear and a confounding twist to its already unsettling story. It wasn't long after the initial wave of attacks in Puerto Rico subsided that new, chilling reports began to surface. This time, the fear emanated from the vast, sprawling landscapes of Mexico. What started as isolated incidents in rural communities soon escalated into a string of baffling livestock deaths that mirrored the horrors previously seen on the island. Farmers in remote villages, particularly in the northern regions, woke to find their goats, chickens, and even dogs lying lifeless, their bodies pale and bloodless. Just like in Puerto Rico, the telltale signs were their minimal struggle, strangely precise puncture wounds, and the complete, inexplicable absence of blood. The initial response in Mexico was, understandably, one of bewilderment. Was this a copycat phenomenon, a strange coincidence, or had the creature, or creatures, somehow traveled across the sea? The local authorities and residents were caught off guard. They had heard the stories from Puerto Rico, perhaps dismissed them as folklore or sensationalized news. But now, the nightmare was on their doorstep. The fear that had gripped Puerto Rico began to seep into the hearts of Mexican villagers, turning their once familiar nights into periods of anxious vigilance. Livestock, vital to their survival, were dying in the same horrifying way, leaving behind a trail of confusion and dread. As these reports from Mexico grew in number and intensity, something truly peculiar began to emerge. The descriptions of the supposed attacker started to shift, subtly at first, then more dramatically. The towering, bipedal, reptilian creature with glowing red eyes that had terrorized Puerto Rico was not quite what people were seeing. Or rather, not quite what they were not seeing. Instead of tales of a scaly monster, witnesses began to describe something different. Something that was both less exotic and, in its own way, just as disturbing. The Chupacabra, it seemed, was shape-shifting, or perhaps, different versions of the creature were emerging in different locations. In Mexico, the accounts often spoke of a smaller, quadrupedal animal, one that moved on all fours. It was often described as canine-like, resembling a dog or a coyote, but with unsettling deviations from the norm. These new descriptions were a stark contrast to the initial terrifying image from Puerto Rico, adding another layer to the already perplexing mystery. This new, canine Chupacabra quickly became the dominant image in the reports from Mexico and, subsequently, from the American Southwest. The creature was often described as being the size of a medium-sized dog, sometimes larger, like a coyote, but the most consistent and unsettling features were its appearance, usually hairless, with rough, grayish skin, often mottled or scarred. Its body was frequently depicted as emaciated, almost skeletal, with prominent ribs and a hunched posture. The eyes, while not always described as glowing red, were often said to be large and dark, giving it a gaunt, almost zombie-like appearance. Some reports even mentioned unusual spinal ridges or bony protrusions along its back, adding to its grotesque and unfamiliar form. The shift in appearance from a reptilian biped to a hairless, sickly dog-like creature was a major turning point in the Chupacabra legend. It created two distinct types of the cryptid, sparking debate and confusion among researchers and enthusiasts alike. Was it the same creature adapting to different environments? Were there multiple species? Or were the sightings simply misidentifications of known animals, distorted by fear and the power of suggestion? The lack of fur, often attributed to severe cases of mange, led many skeptics to dismiss these sightings as nothing more than diseased coyotes or dogs. Yet, the method of attack, the blood draining, remained an unsettling constant. As the mysterious killings continued in Mexico, the chilling phenomenon began to cross another border, creeping into the vast, open spaces of the American Southwest. States like Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, with their rugged terrains and numerous ranches, became the next stage for the Chupacabra's reign of terror. Here, too, livestock were found dead, drained of blood, bearing the same strange puncture wounds, and, consistent with the Mexican reports, the descriptions of the alleged attacker largely conformed to the canine-like image. Ranchers, accustomed to dealing with coyotes, wolves, and mountain lions, were baffled. They knew the signs of a typical predator attack: the torn flesh, the scattered remains, the struggle. This was different. The silence of the kills, the clean, bloodless carcasses, and the almost surgical precision of the wounds defied their understanding of local wildlife. It was as if something was extracting the very essence of life from their animals without leaving any other trace of violence. The fear, therefore, was not just about economic loss, but about the presence of an unseen, unnatural force that defied explanation. The canine chupacabra reports from the American Southwest became incredibly widespread. People would find their chickens, goats, sheep, and even cattle dead in the morning, their blood completely gone. Sometimes, watchdogs would be found dead in the same manner. Or, more chillingly, completely silent, having offered no warning during the night's gruesome events. The mysterious nature of the attacks, coupled with the lack of clear evidence, fueled a powerful sense of dread and helplessness among rural communities. What kind of animal could do this? And why were its victims always drained, never eaten? Despite the stark differences in the creature's appearance across these different regions, from the reptilian horror of Puerto Rico to the gaunt, dog-like entity of Mexico and the American Southwest, one crucial, horrifying detail remained eerily consistent: the method of attack. This was the unifying thread that bound all the Chupacabra reports together, regardless of how the creature itself was described. The consistency was chilling. Time and again, eyewitnesses and farmers discovered their livestock dead, their bodies devoid of blood. This wasn't merely a small amount of blood loss. It was a near-complete exsanguination. The animals were found as hollowed-out husks, their flesh intact but their life force seemingly siphoned away. This specific detail set the Chupacabra apart from any known predator on Earth. Conventional predators kill for food, tearing into their prey, leaving behind clear signs of a struggle and often consuming parts of the carcass. The Chupacabra, however, appeared to kill only for blood, leaving the rest of the body untouched. Furthermore, the wounds themselves maintained a remarkable consistency. They were almost always small, circular puncture marks, usually 2 to 3 in number, typically found on the neck or upper chest area of the victim. These weren't ragged, messy bites. They were precise, clean, almost like needle marks. This suggested a highly specialized feeding mechanism, something designed to extract fluids rather than tear flesh. The absence of other struggle marks, such as broken fences, overturned feed troughs, or trampled ground, further deepened the mystery. It implied a creature of incredible stealth and perhaps even a paralyzing agent that allowed it to subdue its victims without a fight. This unwavering consistency in the method of attack, despite the geographical spread and the evolving descriptions of the creature, was what truly cemented the Chupacabra as a unique and terrifying cryptid. It wasn't just a monster, it was a specialized hunter, a bloodsucker on a scale far beyond anything known to science. Whether it was the reptilian variant in Puerto Rico or the canine-like entity in Mexico and the US, the outcome for the livestock was tragically the same: a silent, bloodless death. The reports of selective livestock targeting also stood out. While any predator might attack various farm animals, the Chupacabra seemed to have a preference for certain types, particularly goats. This is where its very name, goat sucker, gained its ultimate resonance. While other animals were certainly victims, goats appeared to be a primary target, making their loss even more devastating for communities reliant on them. This selectivity, combined with the blood-draining method, painted a picture of a creature that operated with a chilling purpose, not out of random hunger. The spread of the Chupacabra legend across the Americas, and the perplexing evolution of its physical description, only intensified the mystery. It wasn't just a local fright anymore. It was a phenomenon. The creature, whatever its true nature, had demonstrated an uncanny ability to instill fear and leave behind a trail of unanswered questions, turning the seemingly familiar world of rural life into a stage for a truly unsettling, unknown predator. The consistent, silent horror of bloodless deaths continued, a haunting testament to a monster that defied every rational explanation, making its mark across 2 continents with its signature, terrifying attack. The Chupacabra's reign of terror swept across the Americas, leaving a trail of bloodless carcasses and bewildered, terrified communities. But as the fear escalated and the reports multiplied, a more fundamental human need emerged, the need to understand. What was this thing? How could it exist? The scientific community, local authorities, and even ordinary people began to grapple with explanations, attempting to peel back the layers of the mystery, from the most mundane and skeptical theories to the truly unsettling possibilities. The quest to make sense of the Chupacabra became as compelling as the creature itself. One of the immediate and most common responses to any strange animal sighting or unexplained attack is to seek answers in the familiar. Skeptics, armed with a healthy dose of doubt, were quick to point towards known predators. Surely, they argued, these mysterious livestock deaths were simply the work of coyotes, wild dogs, pumas, or even large birds of prey, misidentified or misunderstood by frightened witnesses. After all, these animals are known to kill livestock, especially in rural areas where human and animal habitats often overlap. A farmer waking up to find a dead goat might naturally assume a local predator had struck. However, this rational explanation immediately ran into significant hurdles. The defining characteristic of the Chupacabra attacks, the complete draining of blood and the precise puncture wounds, did not align with the typical behavior of known predators. When a coyote attacks, it tears at the flesh, often leaving ragged wounds, a bloody scene, and consuming parts of the animal for food. Puma, similarly, will use its powerful jaws and claws to bring down prey, often leaving deep bite marks and consuming a substantial portion of the carcass. Birds of prey, while capable of killing smaller animals, leave distinct talon marks and often carry away their victims or tear at them in situ. The Chupacabra's method was fundamentally different. There were no messy struggles, no ripped entrails, no dismembered limbs, just a bloodless, intact husk of an animal, with those eerie, clean punctures. This crucial distinction made it incredibly difficult for the familiar predator theory to hold water for many of the reported incidents. The absence of blood, the untouched flesh, these were not the calling cards of a hungry wild animal seeking a meal. Adding to the skeptics' arguments was the idea that the blood-drained aspect might be an exaggeration or a misinterpretation. Perhaps, some suggested, the farmers were simply seeing what they expected to see, influenced by the burgeoning legend. An animal that has been dead for some time might appear bloodless as its blood settles or coagulates internally, or as scavengers, known or unknown, clean up external traces. It's also possible that farmers, without scientific training, might not fully understand the difference between internal bleeding and external blood loss, or the natural processes of decomposition. The vivid descriptions of completely drained blood could, in this view, be more a product of shock and fear than a precise scientific observation. However, this explanation also faced stiff opposition. Numerous veterinary examinations, conducted on many of the deceased animals, often confirmed significant and inexplicable blood loss. These were not casual observations by frightened farmers. These were professional assessments that acknowledged an unusual phenomenon. While some level of decomposition might lead to a lack of visible external blood, the sheer volume of blood missing from the circulatory system, without corresponding external trauma or internal pooling, was repeatedly noted as anomalous. Furthermore, the specific, consistent puncture marks not just one or two isolated incidents but across hundreds of reports were difficult to dismiss as mere exaggeration or natural decomposition. They pointed to a deliberate, precise act, performed by something. The consistency of these findings across different regions and different experts made it harder to simply write off the blood loss as an overactive imagination. Finally, the most cynical of the skeptical viewpoints proposed that the Chupacabra phenomenon was largely a product of human hoaxes or mass hysteria. The power of suggestion, especially when fueled by sensational media reports, can be immense. People under duress or experiencing fear might misinterpret everyday events, or even deliberately fabricate stories for attention or to explain their losses. The idea of a local prankster, or perhaps several, mimicking the attacks could not be entirely ruled out. Historically, cryptid sightings and unexplained phenomena have often been linked to deliberate deception or collective delusion, where fear feeds on itself, causing people to see what they expect to see. While it is certainly true that individual hoaxes and instances of misidentification likely contributed to some of the Chupacabra reports, it becomes increasingly difficult to sustain this argument when considering the sheer scale and geographic spread of the phenomenon. The number of independent reports, coming from vastly different regions, cultures, and socio-economic backgrounds, stretched the credibility of a widespread, coordinated hoax. Moreover, the economic impact on farmers was very real. These were not just stories. These were tangible losses that deeply affected livelihoods. It's difficult to imagine hundreds of farmers across multiple countries fabricating such devastating losses, especially when there was little clear benefit to doing so, and often significant ridicule. While mass hysteria might explain some embellishments, it struggled to account for the consistent, physical evidence of bloodless carcasses and the unique puncture wounds that were reported independently across continents. The theory of widespread human deception, while possible in isolated cases, seemed insufficient to explain the enduring mystery. Moving beyond the realm of pure skepticism, some theories attempted to explain the Chupacabra within the bounds of known biology, albeit with unusual twists. One of the most compelling and frequently cited explanations, particularly for the canine Chupacabra sightings in Mexico and the American Southwest, centered on the idea of animals suffering from severe sarcoptic mange. Sarcoptic mange is a highly contagious skin disease caused by microscopic mites that burrow into the skin. In severe, untreated cases, particularly in wild canids like coyotes, foxes, and wild dogs, the effects can be devastating. The affected animal loses most, if not all, of its fur, developing thick, leathery, crusty, and often scarred skin. They become emaciated, weak, and desperate. Their appearance can be truly grotesque and unfamiliar: a gaunt, hairless creature with prominent ribs, sunken eyes, and an unnatural gait, precisely matching many of the Chupacabra descriptions from these regions. Furthermore, The extreme discomfort and weakness caused by mange could drive these animals to become unusually aggressive, seeking out easy prey like domestic livestock out of desperation. From a purely visual standpoint, a severely mangy coyote or dog could easily be mistaken for a monstrous, unknown creature by someone unfamiliar with the condition, especially in the dim light of dawn or dusk. This biological explanation held significant appeal because it accounted for the unusual appearance of many chupacabra sightings without resorting to the supernatural. It provided a rational, scientific answer for the monster image. However, even this strong theory faced a critical flaw. It failed to explain the most defining characteristic of the chupacabra attacks: the blood draining. An animal suffering from mange, even if desperate and weak, is still a carnivore. It would kill for food and would consume the flesh of its prey. It would not simply drain the blood and leave the rest of the carcass untouched. The precise, bloodless kills with their characteristic puncture wounds remain unexplained by the mange theory. While mange can explain the appearance of a chupacabra, it cannot explain the modus operandi that terrified communities. Moreover, the mange theory offered no explanation whatsoever for the original reptilian, bipedal creature described in Puerto Rico, suggesting that perhaps entirely different phenomena were being grouped under the same chupacabra label. Another intriguing biological theory, particularly for the more exotic descriptions like the original Puerto Rican chupacabra, posited that the creature could be an undiscovered species. The world, even in the 21st century, still harbors vast, unexplored regions, from deep ocean trenches to remote jungles and mountains. New species of plants and animals are discovered regularly, sometimes even large ones. Could the chupacabra be one such creature? A cryptid, an animal whose existence is unproven, that has managed to elude scientific detection until now. The arguments for an undiscovered species often point to the highly specific and consistent descriptions of the reptilian chupacabra in Puerto Rico. Bipedal, scaly skin, spines down its back, glowing red eyes. Such a distinct set of features, repeated by multiple independent witnesses, could suggest a real biological entity, albeit one unknown to science. Its specialized blood-draining feeding method could be a unique evolutionary adaptation, developed in a specific ecological niche, perhaps targeting small, isolated animal populations. The idea that such a creature could remain hidden for so long is challenging, but not entirely impossible, especially if its population is small, its habitat remote, and its nocturnal habits make it difficult to observe. However, the undiscovered species theory, while exciting, struggles with the lack of concrete evidence. For a creature to be officially recognized as a new species, scientists typically require physical proof, a body, a bone, DNA, or at the very least, clear photographic or video evidence that can withstand scrutiny. The chupacabra has offered none of these, despite hundreds of reported sightings and attacks over decades. No undisputed physical specimen has ever been recovered. The varying descriptions of the creature across different continents also complicate this theory. If it's a single, undiscovered species, why does its appearance change so dramatically from Puerto Rico to Texas? Without a body, the undiscovered species theory remains firmly in the realm of speculation, a tantalizing but unproven possibility. Beyond the more conventional biological explanations, the chupacabra phenomenon also opened the door to far more unsettling and speculative possibilities. tapping into deeper fears about science gone awry or clandestine activities. One such theory suggests that the chupacabra could be a mutated animal, a terrifying byproduct of environmental factors or human interference. The idea of mutated animals resonates with modern anxieties about pollution, genetic engineering, and the unintended consequences of scientific advancement. Could the creature be a known animal, perhaps a bat, primate, or even a canid, that has undergone extreme genetic mutation due to exposure to radiation, toxic chemicals, or some other environmental stressor? This mutation, the theory posits, could have altered its appearance, behavior, and even its physiological needs, leading to the development of specialized fangs for blood extraction and a preference for this unique dietary requirement. The grotesque and unnatural appearance of some chupacabra descriptions, particularly the mangy-looking variants, could be interpreted as a form of mutation, an animal transformed into something monstrous and unfamiliar. While the concept of mutation is real in biology, the extent to which it could explain the chupacabra is highly debatable. Mutations typically result in deformities or impairments that hinder an animal's survival, rather than granting it a new, highly efficient predatory ability like specialized blood-draining fangs. For a creature to mutate into a completely new form, develop a unique predatory method, survive in the wild, and establish a population capable of such widespread attacks, without leaving any clear genetic or physical evidence, stretches the boundaries of scientific plausibility. While it offers a dramatic and disturbing explanation, it lacks any empirical support or a clear mechanism for how such a mutation could have occurred and propagated. It remains a possibility rooted more in science fiction than in verifiable biology. Perhaps the most dramatic and deeply unsettling theory, often whispered in hushed tones, is that the chupacabra is not a natural creature at all, but rather a creation of secret government experiments gone wrong. This explanation taps into a pervasive distrust of authority and the common trope of clandestine operations leading to unforeseen horrors. The idea is that a government, perhaps the United States or even a local Puerto Rican agency, was conducting highly classified biological experiments, attempting to create a new type of bioweapon, a super soldier animal, or some other genetically engineered entity. The chupacabra, in this scenario, would be one or more specimens that escaped from a secure facility, now running wild and terrorizing the population. This theory offers a compelling, albeit frightening, explanation for many of the chupacabra's perplexing traits. Its unusual, almost alien appearance, reptilian, bipedal, glowing eyes, could be attributed to genetic manipulation. Its specialized blood-draining method could be a deliberately engineered predatory mechanism. Its ability to elude capture and disappear without a trace could be due to advanced training or intrinsic capabilities given to it during its creation. The secrecy surrounding the initial attacks and the lack of official answers would, for proponents of this theory, be further evidence of a government cover-up, desperate to conceal their catastrophic error. The sudden appearance of such a bizarre and effective predator, seemingly out of nowhere, perfectly aligns with the narrative of an escaped experimental subject. However, like many conspiracy theories, the government experiment explanation, while dramatic, suffers from a severe lack of concrete evidence. While governments do engage in classified research, there has never been any credible, verifiable information or leaked documents to suggest the existence of such a project that could have created the Chupacabra. It relies heavily on circumstantial evidence, speculation, and a general distrust of official narratives, without any physical proof. Eyewitness testimony from disillusioned scientists, or leaked government documents. This theory remains firmly in the realm of conjecture and urban legend. It provides a thrilling explanation for the unknown, but one that lacks any foundational empirical support. In the end, the Chupacabra mystery remains just that, a mystery. Each theory, from the most mundane to the most outlandish, attempts to grasp at a piece of the truth, to impose order on a phenomenon that defies easy categorization. The skeptical viewpoints highlight the human tendency to misinterpret and exaggerate, while the biological theories offer plausible, albeit incomplete, explanations for certain aspects of the sightings. The more unsettling possibilities tap into our deepest fears about science and the unknown, suggesting that there might be horrors lurking just beyond our comprehension. Whether born of mutation or clandestine design, the debate rages on, fueled by lingering questions and the haunting reality of those bloodless carcasses, leaving us to wonder what exactly stalks the night, leaving such a chilling, indelible mark across the Americas, even as the frantic search for scientific explanations began, attempting to pin down the Chupacabra within the known boundaries of biology and logic. The creature had already woven itself into the fabric of human consciousness. It was more than just a biological enigma or a series of unexplained animal deaths. It had rapidly evolved into something far more profound. The Chupacabra solidified its place as a modern folk demon, a tangible embodiment of humanity's most primal, deep-seated fears, the dread of an unknown attacker lurking in the shadows. Think about the monsters that have haunted our nightmares throughout history. They are often shapeless things in the dark, figures that strike unseen, or creatures that steal away what we hold most dear. The Chupacabra tapped into these ancient fears with unnerving precision. It was not merely a wild animal. Its stealth, its mysterious methods, and its often unseen presence made it a perfect representation of the hidden danger, the predator that defies detection, the fear of something that strikes in the night, silently and efficiently, leaving no trace of a struggle, is a fear that bypasses rational thought and goes straight to our most instinctual survival mechanisms. It's the fear of the invisible knife, the unseen hand, the danger that you cannot anticipate or defend against. The Chupacabra became a contemporary bogeyman, a monstrous cautionary tale for a new generation. Its unique characteristics, the blood draining, the precise puncture wounds, the sudden appearance and disappearance fueled the terror. Unlike a bear or a wolf, whose behavior is largely predictable, the Chupacabra operated outside the rules of known predation. This unpredictability amplified the fear, suggesting a creature with an unsettling intelligence or a supernatural ability to avoid detection. It wasn't just about losing livestock. It was about the chilling thought of what could be out there, capable of such precise and silent devastation. What if it decided to target humans next? This unspoken question hung heavy in the air, a constant source of unease in the communities it terrorized. Furthermore, the Chupacabra legend resonated with contemporary anxieties that were just beginning to take root in the public consciousness. In an age of rapid scientific advancement, but also growing environmental concerns and a burgeoning distrust of official narratives, The Chupacabra became a canvas onto which these modern fears could be projected. Was it a genetic experiment gone wrong? A creature unleashed from some clandestine government lab? This explanation, however speculative, tapped into the fear of science overstepping its bounds, of humanity creating its own monsters. Was it an alien visitor? A creature from another world? As some of the more exotic descriptions suggested. This invoked the primal fear of the unknown cosmos, of invaders from beyond the stars. The Chupacabra, therefore, was not just a creature. It was a reflection of the collective anxieties of the late 20th century, embodying the creeping dread of unseen forces shaping our world. It provided a terrifying, yet strangely compelling, narrative for the incomprehensible, allowing people to grapple with unsettling realities through the lens of a monster. The psychological impact of living with such an unexplainable threat was profound. It wasn't just the economic devastation of lost livestock. It was the erosion of safety, the constant feeling of vulnerability. Sleep became a luxury, filled with anxious listening to every creak and rustle in the night. Children, once playing freely, were now kept close, their innocent worlds suddenly populated by a new, terrifying monster. The very landscape seemed to change. The familiar paths and fields now imbued with a sense of lurking menace. The Chupacabra had succeeded in its reign of terror not just through physical attacks, but by expertly preying on the human mind, creating a pervasive atmosphere of dread that stretched far beyond the individual incident. It transformed the simple act of living in a rural community into an ongoing struggle against an invisible, bloodthirsty shadow. While the Chupacabra burst onto the scene in the 1990s as a distinctly modern phenomenon, its rapid integration into the collective consciousness, particularly in Latin American cultures, was a testament to the deep roots of folklore and oral traditions in these societies. These are cultures rich in stories of mythical creatures, spirits, and supernatural events, where the line between the natural and the extraordinary is often beautifully blurred. The Chupacabra didn't just appear. It found fertile ground in a tradition that readily accepts the existence of unseen forces and monstrous entities. Latin American folklore is populated by a vibrant cast of characters. From the mournful La Llorona, a weeping woman who haunts waterways, to the mischievous duendes, tiny elf-like beings. These stories are passed down through generations, shaping cultural identity and providing explanations for the inexplicable. Cautionary tales for the young, and entertainment for all. When the Chupacabra emerged, with its bizarre appearance and gruesome attacks, it seamlessly slotted itself into this existing framework. It was a new face for an old fear, a contemporary addition to a rich tapestry of monsters and spirits that have long populated the imagination of these communities. It quickly became a topic of conversation, a shared story, a part of the everyday cultural landscape, as real and impactful as any other legendary figure. Crucially, the Chupacabra found its primary victims and its most fervent believers in rural communities. These are often isolated populations, deeply dependent on their livestock for survival, living in areas where modern amenities and immediate emergency services might be scarce. For them, the loss of an entire flock of goats or a pen of chickens was not merely an inconvenience. It was an economic catastrophe that could push a family into destitution. The Chupacabra, therefore, became a terrifying embodiment of their inherent vulnerability. It preyed not just on their animals, but on their livelihoods, their sense of security, and their very way of life. In these communities, where the cycle of life and death is closely observed, and where the forces of nature hold immense power, the Chupacabra represented a breakdown of the natural order. Predators were understood, their behaviors known, but this creature operated outside those rules. It was an anomaly, a rogue element that defied classification, leaving behind nothing but fear and destruction. The authorities, often distant or unable to offer concrete solutions, seemed powerless against this unseen threat. This further intensified the feeling of helplessness among villagers, reinforcing the idea that they were alone in facing this inexplicable monster. The legends surrounding the Chupacabra, particularly in Latin America, also served a vital cultural function. In the absence of immediate scientific explanations or effective defenses, the stories became a way to cope with the terror. They provided a narrative, however frightening, for events that otherwise seemed utterly random and meaningless. By giving the creature a name, a description, and a set of behaviors, even if contradictory, communities could begin to process the trauma and forge a shared understanding of their ordeal. It became a bonding experience, a common struggle against a malevolent force that transcended individual fear. Children would be warned about the Chupacabra, not just as a ghost story, but as a very real threat, reinforcing community values of vigilance and protection. The legend, in this sense, became a tool for survival, however grim. Moreover, the Chupacabra's attacks, particularly the blood-draining aspect, resonated with existing beliefs in dark magic, vampirism, and malevolent entities that consume life force. While not directly linked to specific pre-existing myths, the core concept of a creature that sustains itself on blood aligned with ancient fears of supernatural beings that prey on the vulnerable. This cultural resonance helped to cement the Chupacabra's place in folklore, allowing it to quickly become a recognized and feared entity within the rich tapestry of Latin American legend. A testament to the enduring human need to categorize and narrativize even the most terrifying aspects of the unknown. The Chupacabra wasn't just a monster that attacked. It was a monster that understood vulnerability and exploited it, becoming a potent symbol of external threats to fragile existence. Decades have passed since the initial wave of Chupacabra sightings first swept across Puerto Rico, Mexico, and the American Southwest. In that time, scientists, cryptozoologists, and skeptical investigators have put forth numerous theories, ranging from the plausible to the mundane, to explain the phenomenon. The mange-ridden coyote theory, in particular, gained significant traction as a rational explanation for the hairless, dog-like creatures reported in many regions. Indeed, photos and even some captured carcasses of these animals have shown clear signs of severe sarcoptic mange, leading many to conclude that the canine Chupacabra was simply a misidentified, diseased animal. While this explanation offered a sense of closure for many, a troubling truth remained for those who truly paid attention to the initial, distinct reports. The core mystery of the original Chupacabra, the one that first terrified Puerto Rico, had not been resolved. For many people, especially those directly impacted by the terrifying events of 1995 in Puerto Rico, the scientific explanations simply did not fit. The descriptions of the original Chupacabra were starkly different from a mangy coyote. Witnesses spoke of a bipedal, reptilian creature, with glowing red eyes and spines down its back. This was not a four-legged, emaciated canid. This was something truly alien, something that defied any known biological classification. While it's easy to dismiss these accounts as fear-induced hallucinations or exaggerations, the consistency of these specific details across multiple independent witnesses in a localized geographic area was difficult to simply ignore. The original Chupacabra was a distinct entity, and the explanations for the later canine variant did nothing to address its unique, terrifying characteristics. Furthermore, the most critical element of the Chupacabra attacks, the precise, bloodless exsanguination, remained an anomaly that the scientific explanations struggled to fully account for. While a mangy coyote might kill a goat, it would not drain it of every drop of blood through clean puncture wounds without consuming the flesh. This unique method of killing, consistently reported in both the original Puerto Rican incidents and many subsequent attacks, defied the known predatory behavior of any animal. No documented disease or known predator, even a severely debilitated one, exhibits this exact pattern of blood draining with precise wounds and no other signs of struggle or consumption. This central, horrifying detail continued to haunt the mystery, a persistent anomaly that resisted all rational attempts at explanation. The unsettling reality, therefore, is that for a significant portion of the population, particularly those who were closest to the initial outbreak of fear, the Chupacabra mystery lingers. The scientific explanations, while valuable in clarifying some of the later, morphologically different sightings, often fell short in addressing the original, more exotic accounts. This left a void, a persistent question mark in the minds of many. If the canine Chupacabra was just a mangy coyote, then what was the creature that terrorized Puerto Rico in 1995? What was the source of those initial, precise blood-draining attacks that left no flesh consumed? This unresolved core of the mystery continued to gnaw at the edges of their understanding, creating a deep-seated feeling that the full truth had not been revealed, or perhaps could not be revealed. This enduring lack of resolution has a profound psychological impact. It means that the fear, while perhaps less acute than during the initial attacks, never truly dissipates. The unsettling thought that something unknown and predatory could still be out there, operating beyond the reach of scientific explanation, remains a quiet but persistent undercurrent. For those who experienced the terror firsthand, the Chupacabra is not just a legend. It is a memory of a real, tangible threat that redefined their sense of safety. Even if the world has moved on, dismissing many of the sightings as mere misidentifications, the fundamental mystery of those first, chilling attacks remains a haunting testament to the existence of an unknown terror that, for many, has never been truly laid to rest. The Chupacabra, in its most terrifying, original form, continues to exist as a specter of the unexplained, a chilling reminder that some mysteries refuse to be easily solved, leaving a lingering shadow of doubt and dread in its wake. The Chupacabra legend persists, a shadow just beyond understanding, myth or monstrous reality. The chilling question remains, what truly stalks the night, leaving a trail of fear and blood? Thank you for daring to delve into the unknown with Gravevale Echoes. If these whispers from the past captivated you, don't